Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this presentation in which I'm going to talk to you about continuing professional development, otherwise known as CPD, and how virtual learning environments can help in supercharging CPD. My name is Penny Mosavian and I work at the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom as a Director of Studies and Teaching Fellow. I work specifically in the short course unit at Applied Linguistics, and we work with small groups of visitors who come to us to develop their English language and also their cultural and intercultural skills. And that is usually ranging from undergraduate to postgraduate, doctoral students and faculty staff. And in fact, my key area of responsibility is to develop training programs for teachers, either pre-service or in-service, and other educators from all around the world and in different educational settings. So if you were to go over to the website, which you could do after this presentation, and you wanted to have a look at the kinds of things that we do, you can click on those and have a closer read. But today, I've come to talk about continuing professional development. Now, when we think about continuing professional development, a lot of different things come into mind. Certainly from my point of view, I believe that the emphasis within this terminology should stay on continuing, both before and after the training. And if we're talking about supercharging continuing professional development, what exactly does that mean? It always occurs to me that continuing professional development can mean so many different things to different people. And a lot of people, when they hear that they've been invited to a professional development session, this kind of scenario pops into my head. And I often think, well, you know, you arrive to hear somebody talking about better ways of doing things, and you sit and you listen for a day or maybe a couple of days, and then you write copious notes and you go off with a lovely pack of materials, but then that's it. So for me, continuing professional development has a much wider remit than simply turning up and listening to somebody telling you how to do something you know how to do really well in the first place anyway. So with that in mind, and I wonder how many people recognise that skyline, I was asked a couple of years ago by both Warwick University in conjunction with a university in Shanghai Jiao Tong University, to put together a teacher training program for mainly in-service teachers from different educational settings from across the whole of China. And the big challenge for me was that I was asked to go and do that in China rather than a group coming to us over in the UK. So I thought, goodness gracious me, you know, it's a 4-week training program. I can't just turn up on day one and introduce myself and lose so much time getting to know people. And my remit was a 4-week program to address the needs and challenges that provincial areas in China are currently facing in raising standards and learning outcomes in the field of English language teaching. So you can imagine planning for that. As I've said, just coming along on day one and saying, hi, I'm Penny and I'm here to teach you A, B and C. I felt we had to do something more than simply just rock up and teach and go again, especially if the remit covered a lot of teachers from around the country who were really looking to make a difference in their teaching practice. I know generally that there are quite a few barriers to effective continuing professional development. Apart from anything else, people who take part in professional development very often have a different interpretation of what that should look like. We don't always define very clearly what it is we're trying to do. Could be because of time constraints. It could be because a lot of people see continuing professional development as top down. Management want to be seen to be doing these programs so that the teachers improve. But I believe that we really need to get into teachers' minds to help them develop in ways that means something to them personally in their context. And on top of that, in relation to this particular program, I was working at a distance. And so I thought very hard about how could I make sure that this particular 4-week program with these wonderful teachers could really make a difference to them in their teaching context. I hadn't met them. I didn't know who they were. I didn't have enough time, even in 4 weeks, to really get behind that. And so I developed something called a Shanghai model. I knew that, yes, as I always do, planning was key, but well in advance. And I wanted to have a solid and supportive lead into the training. I thought I need to be able to meet the teachers before I get there and engage with them well before the training starts, to get to know them, to know their context, to understand what they're doing, what their problems are before we arrive there, so that when we got to Shanghai, we knew that we were going to deliver a full 4 weeks of content that would be meaningful and helpful. And I didn't want them to come to the training and then have to do all the ice-breaking activities. I felt that they needed to get to the training and be able to start on their research, on their micro-teaching, on their peer teaching straight away. And then I also thought, well, hang on a second, we're going to do all this work before, we're going to do intensive work on the ground, but I need to make sure also that that teacher training continues beyond Shanghai. And so I wanted to ensure whatever we decided to do, however we decided to put this program into place, it had impact and sustainability. Wanted it to carry on. How could I make it carry on? So what did I do? I thought very hard, and I thought, well, most institutions, lots of places have a tool already in place called a virtual learning environment. And I believed that this was the key to ensure that everything I was hoping to achieve would happen. Our virtual learning environment would be very helpful in helping us to move the training forward before we got there, to ensure that everybody had everything they needed by the time they arrived at the training. And it was a tool as well to ensure that the impact of the training could continue beyond the actual face-to-face workshops that we were doing. We know that the virtual learning environment can be a really valuable tool for teacher continuing professional development. And this was something that I wanted to investigate further. So whether you call it a content management system, a learning management system, a virtual learning environment, doesn't really matter. We needed a secure hub, the core, to bring all of these key success factors together. And not just before the course, but for afterwards too. And these are some of the key advantages of using a virtual learning environment. They are accessible, flexible, not location dependent, they're cost efficient, and generally dependable, that should say, really. They're dependable things for us all to access and use to support each other. And so at Warwick, we use Moodle. I'm sure that most people are very familiar with a virtual learning environment or a content management, so whatever you want to call it. Moodle is just one. There are others, like Canvas, Blackboard, etc. But we happen to use Moodle. So that's what I turn to support the programme. And in order to make it work properly, I had to have a solid pedagogical kind of model, if you like, to support the training. And I looked to Gilly Salmon's 5-stage model, which is quite a widely known model to support training and development. The reference is there if you want to look into that after this presentation. This 5-stage model helped me to think about how the teachers would access the training, and I wanted to motivate them, and I wanted them to, moving on to step 2, to socialize online before the training, so that by the time they came to the teacher training itself, the workshops themselves, they were already exchanging information, and that in step 4, they would be at a point arriving at the training workshops to start to begin to construct the knowledge, to share ideas, to try ideas out, to be confident enough to actually test out teaching ideas, and then finally to move on to the development stage, and to take those ideas and things they've tested out back to rural parts of China and work in their classrooms using the ideas that they'd thought about. So this really gave me a chance to develop and consolidate teachers' skills, and I would be able to provide insight into their own professional development, both online and face-to-face. And it was a great way to start discussions and accelerate the interaction amongst the workshop participants. And of course, as we all want to do, we want to create a community of practice. It's this idea of collaborating beyond continual professional development that helps teachers to grow in confidence and to take those risks, if you like, in their classrooms, to try out new ideas, knowing that they can share them with each other. And there you have the reasons why we decided to use this model. And so the first stage was to set up on Moodle the Warwick Shanghai English Language Teacher Development Programme. This was in July 2018. We reached out to our participants well before the course began and invited them to complete a pre-course needs analysis. And that included them recording themselves teaching and sending us short video clips so that we could meet and watch before we got there. And those were shared online. And we also set up a course notice board and a social forum and reached out to everybody so that they could start talking to each other. We asked participants to introduce themselves, to talk about their hopes, their expectations for the 4-week training program, and built that sense of community before we actually got to Shanghai. And they had access to readings and resources. We completed a needs analysis, and already we noticed high levels of motivation and a dialogue building between the participants with a sense of purpose for coming to the workshops on the ground. And we also gave them quite a demanding pre-course task. So what we asked them to do, because there were groups of teachers coming from different universities around the country, and we asked teachers to come with a with a lesson plan and a prepared session to deliver. And that was quite challenging for them, because we asked them to work in teams of 2 or 3 teachers, and we asked them to prepare a lesson plan using a standard format, something they currently used. It was really important for everything to be relevant to their context. To prepare a 45-minute lesson relating to a topic of their choice. Here's a sample of some of the topics we suggested that they try out there. So that when they got to Shanghai, they were ready to hit the ground running by delivering a section of a lesson, so that we could start peer observations and peer workshops straight away. And there were lots of questions generated out of this. We had lots of questions on our forum about, what do I do? Is this okay? And we shared those questions in the forums generally, and the participants were talking to each other before the workshops. Okay, so when they did get to Shanghai, or on their way to Shanghai, if you like, this online socialization, we were advancing into the concept, Gilly Salmon's concept of connectedness. So participants who attend continuing professional development very often bring their own ideas, their own luggage, if you like, to a workshop, and that can include anxieties, hopes, fears, worries. And we had kind of identified some of those and allayed fears and answered lots of questions. And there was an emerging micro community. There was a spark of a community of practice by the time we got to the actual training workshops. And the participants had already met each other. They were finding ideas in common, areas of teaching practice that they were interested in, to improve, to investigate, to research. And they were already confident with the technology in accessing the Moodle platform. So we'd done a lot of groundwork before we actually got to the training workshop, thanks to the VLE. And because the participants had spent several weeks before the face-to-face workshops using the virtual learning environment, they were already interacting with the resources. So we were able to identify areas of interest and share web links, databases, case studies, putting them in touch with each other. And they were talking to each other. Now, a word of warning at this stage. At this point, we were conscious that by getting to the actual face-to-face workshops on the ground, we didn't want anybody to be in information overload. So the trainers were able, once we met up in Shanghai, to give structure to the areas of interest, to keep things organized, and tutors were able to keep participants focused. By the time we got to the face-to-face workshops, we were able to use the time much more efficiently, and we wanted to just push the participants one step further and suggested an action research project. Now, they'd been working in their teams in their universities in rural China, but when we got to the face-to-face workshops, because they knew each other quite well and they knew areas of common interest quite well, we were able to then put into place an action research project relevant to their own teaching context. It was set up specifically to challenge teachers from different parts of China to identify areas of teaching they found challenging, or they wanted to take a little bit further, and to work with colleagues from across the country to take the first stages of the project forward. And so we'd done enough groundwork through the virtual learning environment by that time. And we used a model called Exploratory Action Research, which is developed by Richard Smith and Paula Rebolledo, whereupon it's an action research cycle, so it's cyclical. But we knew that this particular model of action research, where you think of something, you try something out, you investigate it, then you reflect on it, then you go back again, were the first steps into the sustainability aspect of this particular project, a training workshop. We used that model of the action research project to go back to the Moodle site and into the next stage of Gilly Salmon's model, which is the knowledge construction. And whereas when we started out with this particular teacher training session, with our pre-course information, our week 1, our week 2, week 3, week 4, etc. If you look at that slide there, you can see that there are other photographs, some of the areas that came out of the action research aspect of the training. Our teachers talked to each other, they talked to colleagues from all around China, and talked about areas of teaching and learning that interested them, and decided to team up to focus on investigating those areas. And you can see there that some of the teachers were interested in student motivation, using first language in the classroom, classroom management, lesson planning, teaching large classes. And these were all very relevant to their own teaching context in their rural settings. These were areas that they got different aspects of these particular topics that they wanted to look at. So rather than keep them in teams in one university together, we mixed them up so that they were talking to somebody from the north of China or the south of China, or a school in northwest China talking to a school in southeast China. And so that we were laying those foundations of a community of practice within the action research, within the teacher training, that we knew that we could follow through to assess impact and keep this project sustainable. So the next stage was development. We were moving into week 3 and 4 of the training, and you can see here that roles were changing. Teachers were becoming questioners rather than just providers of answers. And teachers really thinking about trying ideas out in their teaching, in their classrooms, rather than being filled up with ideas. They were developing, because they were talking to each other, talking to teachers from all over the country, they were developing multiple perspectives on a topic. And rather than isolated teams or teachers from different universities, we now had the teachers were talking to each other, they were talking in groups, and the dialogue was happening in the workshop training and also on Moodle through the forum discussions. And so there was this development. They were really growing in skills, confidence, and becoming a real community of practice. And obviously, we were moving then, we were thinking about stage 2 as the training drew to a close, and they were going back off to their different teaching contexts, going back to their universities and their schools in different parts of China. Here was the monitoring aspect, a stage 2, if you like, of the continuing professional development. And as I said at the beginning of the presentation, for me, in continuing professional development, the emphasis has to be on continuing. It's no good just coming, doing something, going away and not having any meaning attached to it. And we wanted to leave the course knowing that we'll be able to support all of these wonderful participants, both technologically and pedagogically. And we wanted to commit to ensure that they'd had such a good lead into the actual workshops and worked very hard through those workshops. We wanted them to feel supported once they'd gone back into the teaching context and started trying out quite a few new ideas. And so, oops. It's really at the end of CPD that things sometimes fall over. We were asking them, what will you do next? And its research has confirmed that it's the absence of monitoring after CPD that causes it to fail. It's failure in teacher professional development. And it was very important for us. We spent weeks leading up to the training and the early part of the course explaining, demonstrating, emphasizing how important it is to scaffold processes in teacher training. And we wanted those teachers to go back to their teaching context, understanding that, you know, we were still with them, we were still interested in what they were doing. We wanted to try those ideas out. We would like them to feed back to us their reflections, their ideas, what worked, what didn't work. So how did we decide to do that? Well, you can imagine the virtual learning environment was pivotal at this point. Here we had a solid, reliable, dependable tool, Moodle, not confined by distance, location, and time. We could carry on using Moodle to help our teachers, and we could also look to add tools to Moodle to support them. And importantly, by this time as well, we had growing stakeholder buy-in. University management, school management were interested to know the outcomes of the professional training, and they wanted to see impact as well. So we had to keep that momentum, if you like, going in order to ensure that the professional development was in fact continuing. So our Moodle site remained open and still does to this day. We organised some teach meets, which didn't have to be live, online, in live time kind of meeting up, but they were opportunities for our participants to contribute to ongoing discussions about what they were doing, feedback, problems, questions, etc. I will admit at this point, WeChat took over a little bit because we'd set up, this is the main means of communication in China, and there were a lot of conversations, but it doesn't matter. It's still ongoing conversation about a training course, ensuring that the support is still there. And then there you have the advantages of the teach meets. So continued dialogue, new questions, resources and idea sharing. It's that sense of continuity and building community that's so important. And then 6 months later, we actually organised a more formal webinar with some of my co-tutors. We did an exploratory webinar. We felt that 6 months was quite a good period of time to allow our participants to reflect on the training, to try things out, to think about it themselves, talk about it in their groups on Moodle, and then maybe try something different. It's that cyclical action research. And we held an exploratory webinar where our participants presented what they tried out and reported back to the rest of the group. And the aims were to understand the changes they'd made to their teaching, what challenges, if any, they were finding whilst trying out, ideas, activity and methods, and to keep the discussion and community of practice going. Now, the presentation time isn't sufficient for me to show you that, but there is a link on here. And if you want to contact me for presentation slides, I will share these with you, and you can watch that webinar on YouTube. We also wanted to gain from the webinar discussions formative feedback to our trainers, the people who were helping us in Shanghai, to the 2 universities that set up the CPD, and to inform future projects, and to report back to stakeholders, management and other interested parties that were interested in the actual format of the training, which is so important in CPD because it's such an investment of time. So it's really important that you're fully informed on impact of CPD. And what actually evolved out of the first iteration was the Teacher Development Programme Take 2, which took place in 2019. It grew. We went from 60 participants to 90 participants. The training moved away from the city. We moved to a provincial university to make the training more accessible in rural areas. So we had more universities in attendance, more participants, and our VLE rolled over. We were able to take everything from Moodle as a repository, as a record of what we'd done before, and to use it in the same way for the 2019 cohort. And we were delighted that out of the training and out of the webinar and out of the conversations, 4 of our participants from 2018 then became facilitators. So we were handing the ropes over, if you like, to people on the ground, to teachers on the ground who felt confident, who felt empowered to begin to help others grow in the training and to help. They'd experienced the training in Shanghai. They were in attendance in Yunnan province, and they were helping us set up and inputting their own experience, and became facilitators. And there they are, our wonderful facilitators in 2019. I'm standing next to Ben, and from left to right is Melody, Jackie and Ruby, who worked very hard to help us set up the training in 2019. And of course, we were keen to know about people's feelings throughout the training. We did a lot of work talking to people and interviewing people. And we asked them to fill in questionnaires, which fed into a research project. You can see there just simply by 2 of the results that we were lucky enough to have most people satisfied. In fact, the people who weren't satisfied were people who had problems and dropped out of the course. So I don't know if that was interpreted slightly differently, but it was successful. And in 2020, our 4 researchers, our 4 facilitators, have become our trainers in situ. It was never our intention to go back this year. Instead, we were going to combine all of our resources on Moodle and have those 4 facilitators perhaps grow to 6 facilitators, with participants from the 2019 training, and they would do the training workshops themselves rather than somebody go out and deliver them, because they're experienced, they understand, they know, they're empowered, they're talented, enthusiastic, and the local people on the ground would in fact deliver the training, widening participation, widening impact. We were planning workshops to take place in rural locations conducted by those local trainers, opening up to a wider audience, more accessible, but continued to continuing support online through Moodle with all of those original resources, plus the additional tools as they now become available and integrated into Moodle to support them. Now, of course, with the current situation, 2020, and the challenges that arrived this year meant that those workshops couldn't go ahead. However, we are planning some winter workshops online. They're coming up in November, and we're all on a very steep learning curve throughout the pandemic, thinking about how best we can move forward. All of the participants, there's well over 150 participants, still have access to the Moodle resources and the VLE, and there's still that conversation going on using Moodle. As everybody knows, lots of things are moving online and the benefits are still being reaped throughout. So we know that we have a successful model because of positive participant feedback, and all of our short course CPD courses now are being moved online for the time being anyway, and we are applying this sense of extended training, continuing professional development to all of the short courses, so that everybody can reap the benefit well before the training and for quite a long time afterwards, because we want optimal impact. And I think personally, I think at the moment that this is so important in the current situation, in the current challenges we're all facing. And of course, stakeholders want value for money. And so to conclude the presentation, I'll just introduce you to the team at Warwick University who deal with short courses. Professor Neil Murray, he directs the non-award bearing courses, and Jonathan is a colleague who develops communications and reaches out to institutions who would be interested in doing some work with us. You can see me there with my colleague Kathy. The two of us are responsible for designing programs of continuing professional development to meet specific needs. And the three lovely ladies are the three lovely ladies who look after students throughout the courses, whether they're on campus or whether it's online. And that's our short course team. You may have some questions, which of course, because this is recorded, it's not possible to ask me right now. However, by all means, do contact me. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can email me directly at Warwick University, or the short courses directly, or indeed Jonathan, and we will be very happy to hear from you if you have any questions about the project in Shanghai, which occur to you afterwards, or if there's just generally anything you want to ask about in terms of the work that we do. And I'd like to thank you very, very much for listening, and stay safe, everybody. Take care of yourselves. And thank you very much, TESOL Arabia, for asking me to present. Thank you.